Zethkalar pressed his six-fingered hand against the holographic display, watching the swirling patterns of stars and trade routes that made up the Galactic Atlas. As the lead cartographer for the mapping consortium, he had spent the last 40 years updating star charts and plotting new routes across known space. But today something was wrong. The problem wasn't what was on the map. It was what wasn't. He zoomed out, letting the display show the full scope of the galaxy. The familiar spiral arms stretched before him, dotted with the bright markers of inhabited systems and the gentle blue lines that marked established trade routes. Everything looked normal until he noticed the gap. It was enormous. A section of space nearly 1/6 the size of the mapped galaxy sat empty on his charts. Not empty because nothing was there, but empty because it had been deliberately left blank. The borders were too clean, too precise to be natural. Zethkalar's purple skin darkened with confusion. In all his years as a cartographer, he had never seen anything like this. He pulled up the historical archives, searching through thousands of years of mapping data. The gap had always been there. Every map, every chart, every navigation database he could access showed the same thing. The silent expanse, as it was labeled in the oldest files, was marked as unexplored territory. But that made no sense. In 10,000 years of galactic civilization, surely someone would have sent a probe or survey ship into that region. He started, digging deeper, accessing archives that required special permissions. Most cartographers never bothered with these files. They were old, written in dead languages, and often corrupted. But Zethkalar was thorough. That's when he found the first warning. It was buried in a Catherian naval archive, written in an ancient dialect that took him hours to translate. The message was simple. Let the silent places remain silent. Some borders exist for good reasons. His hands shook as he continued searching. More warnings appeared, scattered across different archives, and written in dozens of languages. The Vorthak Empire had a similar message. The Atlas ends where wisdom begins. The old Zelani Star Kingdom had been more direct. Where the maps stop, death starts. But it was the final message he found that made his blood run cold. Hidden in the deepest level of the consortium's own archives was a file so old that its encryption was barely functional. When he finally cracked it open, he found a single line of text repeated in every known galactic language. Where the Atlas ends, let it remain ended. Below the warnings was a set of coordinates. Zethkalar stared at the numbers for a long time. They pointed to a system on the very edge of known space, right at the border of the silent expanse. According to his charts, it was just another unremarkable star system with a few rocky planets. Nothing special about it at all. But if it was so ordinary, why were there so many warnings about it? He spent the next 3 days researching everything he could find about that system. The star was yellow, middle-aged, and stable. The planets were mostly small and rocky, except for a few gas giants in the outer system. One of the inner planets was listed as having water and an atmosphere, but it was marked as uninhabited. What bothered him was how little information there was. For a system so close to civilized space, there should have been survey reports, mineral assessments, maybe even failed colonization attempts. Instead, there was almost nothing. The few references he could find were strange. A Trader Guild report from 800 years ago mentioned unusual energy readings from the system before the ship's captain decided to pursue more profitable ventures elsewhere. A Catherian scout ship had logged the system as unsuitable for military purposes, without giving any details why. Most interesting was a note in the personal journal of Captain Thysiak, a famous explorer from 3,000 years ago. She had written, "Approach the yellow star system today. Crew became nervous for no reason I could identify. Equipment began malfunctioning. Decided to turn back. Some places are better left alone." Zethkalar leaned back in his chair, staring at the coordinates on his screen. Every instinct he had developed over 40 years of careful, methodical work told him to file a report about the gap in the Atlas and let someone else investigate. But another part of him, the part that had made him one of the galaxy's best cartographers, was burning with curiosity. He began putting together a proposal for an investigation mission. It would be small, just a survey ship with a basic crew. They would approach the system carefully, take readings from a safe distance, and gather enough data to finally fill in that gap on the map. When he submitted the proposal to his supervisor, the response came back within hours. Denied. He tried again, this time requesting just permission to analyze existing data about the region. Denied again. His third request was even smaller. He asked for access to restricted archives that might contain more information about the silent expanse. This time, his supervisor called him into her office. Zeth Kalar, Director Vixna said, her 4 eyes focused intently on him. You're one of our best cartographers. Your work on the Outer Rim trade routes saved the consortium millions of credits. That's why I'm going to give you some advice. She activated a privacy field around her desk before continuing. Some gaps in our knowledge exist for good reasons. The silent expanse has been unmarked on our charts for 10,000 years. In all that time, dozens of cartographers have noticed it. Most of them filed their reports and moved on to other projects. A few became obsessed with it. What happened to those few? Director Vixna was quiet for a long moment. They disappeared, some officially, on approved research missions that never returned. Others just stopped coming to work one day. Their personal effects were cleaned out, their projects reassigned, and after a while people stopped asking questions. Zeth Kalar felt a chill run down his spine. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to save your life, she said. Drop this investigation. There are thousands of other mapping projects that need your attention. Pick one of those. But as Zeth Kalar walked back to his office, he knew he couldn't let it go. The warnings, the gaps in the data, the fear in his supervisor's voice. It all pointed to something important being hidden in that region of space. That night, he made a decision that would change everything. He began reaching out to people he trusted. Dr. Liana Voss, a human xenobiologist he had worked with on several projects. Commander Thekmore, a retired Catherian military officer who now worked as a private security consultant. PIP-7, a synthetic intelligence who had helped him crack several difficult translation problems. He didn't tell them about the warnings or his supervisor's threats. He just said he had discovered an interesting anomaly that deserved investigation. To his surprise, all 3 agreed to help. Within a week, they had quietly chartered a small research vessel and filed a flight plan for a routine survey mission in a completely different part of the galaxy. Zeth Kalar had falsified the documents, something he had never done in his entire career. As their ship prepared to leave port, Zeth Kalar looked back at the sprawling space station that had been his home for decades. Part of him wondered if he would ever see it again, but the coordinates were burning in his mind like a beacon. Whatever was hidden in the silent expanse had been kept secret for 10,000 years. It was time for someone to finally learn the truth, even if that truth was more terrifying than anyone could imagine. The research ship Stellar Compass dropped out of hyperspace 3 light-years from the target system. Zeth Kalar stood on the bridge, watching the view screen fill with unfamiliar stars. They had traveled farther from civilized space than any of them had ever been before. Well, we made it, Dr. Liana Voss said from the navigation console. The human woman was tall and thin, with dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail. She had been excited about the mission from the beginning, eager to study whatever life forms they might discover in unexplored space. Commander Thekmore checked his security readings for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. The massive Catherian stood, over 7 feet tall, his gray skin marked with the ritual scars of a veteran warrior. Sensors are clear, he rumbled in his deep voice. No ships, no energy signatures, no signs of intelligent life. That's what makes it interesting, PIP-7. Added from the science station. The synthetic being's face was designed to look friendly and approachable, but his glowing blue eyes showed he was processing data at superhuman speeds. According to my calculations, this region should have been explored centuries ago. The fact that it hasn't suggests something has been actively keeping explorers away. Zeth Kalar nodded, but he didn't share his team's confidence. The warnings he had found in the archives were still fresh in his mind. Every instinct told him they should turn around and go home. but he had come too far to give up now. "Take us closer," he ordered. But slowly, full sensor sweeps every few minutes. As they moved deeper into the system, strange readings began appearing on their instruments. Space itself seemed different here. Gravity measurements fluctuated in ways that shouldn't be possible. Energy patterns appeared and disappeared without any visible source. "This is impossible," Dr. Voss muttered, staring at her readings. "The gravitational fields are all wrong. It's like someone moved the planets around." Commander Thekmore's warrior instincts were screaming warnings. "We should be more careful. These readings remind me of military technology, but nothing I've ever seen before." They were still 2 days away from the yellow star when PIP-7 made the first real discovery. "I'm detecting artificial structures," the synthetic announced. "Multiple objects, each roughly the size of a small moon. They're not showing up on visual scanners, but I can detect their gravitational effects." Zethkalar felt his heart's racing. "Can you get a clearer reading?" "Working on it," PIP-7 said, his processors humming quietly. "These structures are using some kind of stealth technology. Very advanced. I can barely detect them at all." As they got closer, more details became clear. The structures weren't just big. They were massive beyond anything the galactic civilizations had ever built. Each one was larger than the biggest space stations, but they were clearly artificial, and they were old, very old. "Carbon dating suggests these structures are at least 15,000 years old," Dr. Voss reported. "But that's impossible. 15,000 years ago, most species in the galaxy were still developing basic agriculture." "Maybe not all species," Commander Thekmore said quietly. The structures were arranged in a defensive pattern around the inner system, like sentries guarding something important. But what could be so valuable that it needed protection on this scale? They got their answer when they reached the yellow star itself. The system had 8 planets, but they weren't arranged in any natural pattern. Someone had moved them. The gas giants had been pushed to the outer edges, creating a defensive barrier. The rocky planets had been repositioned to form a complex orbital pattern that maximized defensive coverage. At the center of it all was the third planet from the star. It looked peaceful enough: blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown landmasses. But the sensor readings told a different story. "The entire planet is covered with defensive installations," PIP-7 reported, his voice filled with electronic amazement. "Power sources that dwarf anything in known space, weapon systems that could destroy entire fleets, and it's all hidden beneath what looks like natural terrain." Dr. Voss was studying the biological readings. "There's life down there, lots of it. But the genetic patterns are unlike anything in our databases. It's not just unlike anything we know," Commander Thekmore said, studying the tactical displays. "This is technology beyond anything the galaxy has seen. Whoever built this could conquer every known civilization without breaking a sweat." Zethkalar stared at the peaceful-looking planet on their view screen. It looked so harmless, so ordinary. But according to their instruments, it was the most heavily fortified world in the galaxy. "Sir," PIP-7 said suddenly, "I'm detecting something else. Ruins, lots of them. On the planet?" "No, sir. Throughout the system, and beyond. I'm picking up traces of similar technology in nearby star systems. Whoever built that planet didn't stop there. They built an empire." Over the next few hours, the full scope of their discovery became clear. The hidden civilization hadn't just built one fortress world. They had built dozens, maybe hundreds. Ancient ruins stretched across multiple star systems, all connected by technology so advanced that it made current galactic science look primitive. But the most disturbing discovery came when Dr. Voss ran a detailed analysis of the genetic samples they had collected. "I need to show you something," she said, calling the others to the science lab. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking slightly. She activated a holographic display showing genetic sequences. "I've been analyzing the biological data from the planet. The dominant life form has a genetic structure I recognize." "From where?" Zethkalar asked. Dr. Voss looked directly at him. "From me, from humans. The dominant life form on that planet is genetically identical to humanity. The silence on the bridge was complete. Commander Thekmore was the first to speak. That's impossible. Humans are a young species. They only achieved spaceflight a few centuries ago. They're barely capable of interstellar travel. That's what everyone believes, Dr. Voss said quietly. But if I'm right, we've been lied to. Humans aren't a young species just learning to explore space. They're an ancient empire that has been hiding in plain sight. Zeth-Kalar felt the universe shifting around him. Everything he thought he knew about galactic history was crumbling. If humans were this advanced, if they had technology that could reshape star systems, then why were they pretending to be a primitive species? There's more, Pip-7 said, processing data streams that would overwhelm organic minds. I'm detecting similar hidden installations throughout known space. They're everywhere, but they're so well concealed that no one has noticed them before. How many? Commander Thekmore asked. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. If my calculations are correct, human technology has been quietly monitoring and potentially controlling galactic civilization for millennia. Dr. Voss sat down heavily, staring at the genetic data. My own species were not who we say we are. As they continued their analysis, a more complete picture began to emerge. The peaceful planet below wasn't just a fortress, it was Earth, the human homeworld. But it wasn't the simple agricultural world that appeared in the galactic databases. It was the command center of a hidden empire that spanned known space. And if the defensive systems they were detecting were any indication, the humans who built this empire weren't the peaceful, curious explorers that the galaxy knew. They were something else entirely, something that had been powerful enough to reshape the galaxy itself, and clever enough to hide that fact from everyone else for thousands of years. As Stellar Compass drifted in the shadow of one of the ancient, defensive platforms, Zeth-Kalar realized they had stumbled onto the greatest secret in galactic history. The question was whether they would live long enough to share it with anyone else. Dr. Liana Voss couldn't stop staring at the genetic data. Every test she ran came back with the same impossible result. The beings living on the planet below were human. Not similar to humans, not related to humans. They were genetically identical to the supposedly primitive species that had only recently joined galactic civilization. Run the analysis again, she told Pip-7 for the 5th time. The results will not change, the synthetic replied patiently. The genetic markers are conclusive. The dominant species on the planet below shares 99.97% genetic compatibility with known human populations. Commander Thekmore studied the tactical displays with growing unease. If humans built all this, then we need to ask ourselves why they're hiding it. In my experience, people only conceal this level of military power for one reason. What reason? Zeth-Kalar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Because they planned to use it. Pip-7 had been working tirelessly to decode data from the ancient structures. His processors were designed for complex analysis, and what he had discovered was reshaping their understanding of galactic history. I have located several data storage facilities among the ruins, he announced. The information is heavily encrypted, but I have managed to access some historical records. The holographic display filled with images and text in dozens of languages. Some Zeth-Kalar recognized as ancient versions of current galactic tongues. Others were completely unknown. This appears to be a historical archive from approximately 12,000 years ago, Pip-7 continued. It references something called the Terran hegemony. Dr. Voss looked up sharply. Terran means of Earth in old human languages. The archive painted a picture that none of them were prepared for. 12,000 years ago, humanity had not been hiding on their small blue planet. They had been the dominant force in this region of the galaxy. The Terran hegemony had controlled hundreds of star systems and commanded fleets that dwarfed anything the current galactic civilizations could imagine. But it wasn't the size of their empire that disturbed the team. It was how they had maintained. These records describe something called Hegemony Protocol, Pip-7 reported. It appears to be a military doctrine based on what humans call total war. The concept involves the complete destruction of enemy military capacity, economic, infrastructure, and political organization. That sounds like genocide, Commander Thekmore said grimly. Not quite, Dr. Voss said, reading through the translated documents. They didn't destroy species, they destroyed civilizations. Any world that resisted hegemony rule was systematically stripped of all technology above a certain level. Their governments were dissolved, their armies disbanded, their industries converted to serve the hegemony. The records showed battle after battle where human forces had faced overwhelming odds and won through tactics that other species found incomprehensible. Humans didn't just defeat their enemies. They broke them so completely that resistance became impossible. Look at this, Zethkalar said, pointing to a tactical report. A human fleet of 30 ships defeated a Catherian armada of over 300 vessels. How is that possible? Commander Thekmore studied the battle reports with professional interest. Their tactics are completely alien to military thinking. Most species fight to achieve specific objectives: capture territory, destroy enemy forces, force surrender. Humans fought to eliminate their enemy's ability to fight back. Ever. The more they learned, the more disturbing the picture became. Human military doctrine wasn't just effective, it was psychologically devastating to their opponents. They had developed warfare into a science that most species couldn't comprehend, let alone counter. But the most shocking discovery came when Dr. Voss found references to something called the Geneva Conventions. According to these records, the Geneva Conventions were restrictions that humans placed on themselves during warfare, she explained. Rules about treatment of prisoners, protection of civilians, limitations on certain weapons. That sounds reasonable, Zethkalar said. That's what I thought too until I read further. The Geneva Conventions weren't created to protect other species. They were created to keep humans psychologically stable during long campaigns. Without these restrictions, human soldiers became too effective at killing, and it drove them insane. The Tue? Silence on the bridge was deafening. The idea that the Geneva Conventions, documents that most galactic civilizations considered examples of enlightened warfare, were actually the minimum standards humans needed to maintain their sanity, was terrifying. There's more, Pip7 added. I have found records indicating that the Terran hegemony controlled approximately 40% of this galaxy's inhabited worlds at its peak. They maintained this control for over 6,000 years. What happened to them? Commander Thekmore asked. The answer came in fragments scattered across thousands of documents. The Terran hegemony hadn't been conquered or destroyed. It had simply disappeared. One day, human fleets controlled nearly half the galaxy. The next, they were gone, but they hadn't really gone anywhere. They had just stopped being obvious about their presence. The records showed a gradual withdrawal that had taken centuries to complete. Human fleets returned to Earth. Human colonies were abandoned or disguised. Advanced technology was hidden or destroyed. It was as if humanity had decided to pretend they had never built an empire at all. Why would they do that? Dr. Voss wondered, aloud. They had won. They controlled most of known space. Why give it up? The answer came in the final set of documents that Pip7 was able to decode. They were personal records from human military and political leaders, diary entries and private communications that revealed the thinking behind humanity's great deception. We have become what we once fought against, one entry read. Our efficiency in warfare has made us efficient at everything, including oppression. We rule the galaxy not through law or justice, but through fear of our military capabilities. Another document was even more direct. The other species look at us the way our ancestors looked at natural disasters. They obey us not out of respect, but because they know we could destroy their civilizations without effort. This is not the future we wanted to build. The final document in the series was a formal declaration signed by something called the Terran High Council. We hereby withdraw from active governance of galactic affairs. Humanity will remain hidden until such time as we can determine whether intelligent life is capable of achieving peaceful coexistence without the threat of overwhelming force. Dr. Voss read the document 3 times before its full meaning sank in. They didn't disappear because they were defeated. They disappeared because they were conducting an experiment. What kind of experiment? Zethkalar asked. They wanted to see if galactic civilization could develop peacefully without humans, controlling everything. They've been watching from the shadows for thousands of years, studying how other species interact when they think they're free to make their own choices. The implications were staggering. Every major event in galactic history over the past several millennia could have been influenced by hidden human intervention. Every war that ended before it became too destructive, every plague that mysteriously burned out, every tyrant who died at a convenient moment, it could all have been managed by humanity's invisible hand. Commander Thekmore summarized what they were all thinking. The entire galaxy has been living in a laboratory and we never knew we were the test subjects. As if responding to his words, their ship's proximity alarm suddenly activated. Something was approaching them. Something big, moving fast and completely invisible to their sensors until it was almost on top of them. Unknown vessel decloaking. Off our starboard bow, Pip-7 announced with electronic calm that contrasted sharply with the panic in his voice subroutines. On their view screen, a ship appeared that was like nothing any of them had ever seen. It was sleek, elegant, and radiated the kind of quiet power that came from absolute technological superiority. No weapons were visible, but somehow that made it even more threatening. Dr. Voss stared at the ship with recognition dawning in her eyes. That's a human vessel. I can see design elements that match historical patterns from Earth. A communication signal reached them, carried on frequencies that their equipment could barely detect. The voice that spoke was calm, professional, and unmistakably human. Stellar Compass. This is Director Chen of the Terran Observation Corps. Please prepare to be boarded. We have much to discuss. Director Chen was not what any of them had expected. She appeared to be a middle-aged human woman, average height with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She wore a simple uniform that looked more like academic clothing than military gear. When she stepped aboard the Stellar Compass, she could have been any researcher from any university in known space, except for her eyes. Her eyes held the kind of quiet authority that came from wielding real power for a very long time. "Thank you for allowing me aboard," she said politely as if they had any choice in the matter. "I apologize for the dramatic arrival. We've been monitoring your approach for several days and frankly, we're impressed you made it this far." Zethkalar found his voice first. "You've been watching us?" "Of course. We watch everyone who gets close to the silent expanse. Most turn back before they reach the outer monitoring stations. The few who continue usually suffer convenient equipment failures that force them to retreat." She smiled slightly. "Your ship has excellent shielding. It took more effort than usual to discourage you." Commander Thekmore's military instincts were screaming. "You caused our equipment malfunctions?" "Nothing dangerous," Director Chen assured him. "We prefer subtle methods. Overt displays of force tend to create more problems than they solve. We learned that lesson the hard way many centuries ago." Dr. Voss stepped forward, her face pale. "You're really human. Like me." "Indeed I am. Though I suspect your definition of human and mine might be somewhat different at this point." Director Chen looked around the small bridge with interest. "Dr. Voss, your research on xenobiology is quite impressive. We've been following your work." "Following my work? How?" "We keep track of all human activity in the galaxy. It's necessary for the experiment." Director Chen gestured toward the view screen, where Earth hung peacefully in the distance. "May I explain what you've discovered? I think you deserve to understand the full scope of what you've stumbled into." She activated a holographic display that made their ship's systems look primitive by comparison. Images filled the air showing star maps, battle formations, and population centers across known space. 12,000 years ago, humanity made a mistake," Director Chen began. "We became too good at warfare. We developed military techniques that other species couldn't counter or even understand. Our expansion across the galaxy was so rapid and overwhelming that resistance became impossible." The display showed the extent of the Terran hegemony at its peak. Red markers indicated human-controlled systems, and there were thousands of them scattered across multiple galactic arms. "We weren't cruel rulers, you understand. We provided security, advanced technology, efficient government. Many species lived better under human administration than they ever had before, but they lived in fear because they knew that all their progress depended on our continued goodwill. Commander Thekmore studied the tactical displays with professional interest. Your military technology was that superior? It wasn't just the technology. It was how we thought about warfare itself. Other species fight to achieve victory. Humans fight to eliminate future conflict. When we conquered a system, we didn't just defeat their military. We made it impossible for them to rebuild it. Dr. Voss was reading through historical data, her expression growing more disturbed. These casualty reports. You didn't commit genocide, but you came close. We broke civilizations instead of destroying them, Director Chen confirmed. We thought it was more humane. We were wrong. The psychological damage we inflicted was often worse than simple destruction would have been. The display shifted to show Earth as it had been during the height of the hegemony. Instead of the peaceful blue world they could see, outside, it had been covered with massive industrial complexes, military installations, and government centers that coordinated the activities of hundreds of worlds. Eventually, our leaders realized that we had become the very thing our ancestors had once feared. An overwhelming force that controlled others through superior firepower. So we made a decision that shocked every military advisor in the hegemony. You withdrew, Zethkalar said. We did more than withdraw. We disappeared. We spent 3 centuries carefully dismantling our visible presence in the galaxy. Fleets were recalled, colonies abandoned, technologies hidden. We made it appear as if human civilization had collapsed back to a single primitive world. PIP-7's processors had been analyzing the data streams from Director Chen's display. But you didn't actually leave. You simply became invisible. Exactly. We developed stealth technology that could hide entire installations. We built monitoring, systems that could observe galactic civilization without being detected, and then we began the greatest experiment in our species' history. The display changed again, showing the current galactic political map. Trade routes, diplomatic connections, and territorial boundaries appeared in different colors. We wanted to answer a simple question. Could intelligent life develop peaceful coexistence on its own, without the threat of overwhelming force keeping everyone in line? For the past 8,000 years, we've been watching to find out. Dr. Voss felt sick as the full implications hit her. Every human in the galaxy, the ones living on colony worlds, working in galactic industries, serving in exploration fleets. Are we all part of this deception? Not all, Director Chen said gently. Many humans living in galactic civilization don't know about the experiment. They genuinely believe humanity is a young species still learning its place among the stars. We call them the surface population. They live normal lives, pursue normal careers, and their ignorance of our true nature is crucial to maintaining the experiment's validity. But some humans know. A few thousand, spread across the galaxy. Researchers, observers, and, when necessary, interventionists. We call ourselves the deep population. We monitor galactic affairs and occasionally take action to prevent catastrophic developments. Commander Thekmore leaned forward. What kind of interventions? Director Chen's expression grew more serious. Wars that might have destroyed entire species have ended due to convenient equipment failures or unexpected diplomatic breakthroughs. Plagues that could have spread across multiple worlds mysteriously burn out. Potential tyrants suffer unfortunate accidents before they can consolidate power. The holographic display showed dozens of examples spanning thousands of years. Each intervention was subtle, appearing to be natural disaster or fortunate coincidence, but the pattern was undeniable. You've been manipulating galactic civilization for millennia, Zethkalar said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and horror. We prefer the term gardening, Director Chen replied. We prune away the most dangerous developments while allowing natural growth to continue. The goal is to see if intelligent life can truly evolve beyond the cycle of conquest and oppression that characterized our early expansion. Dr. Voss was staring at her own hands as if seeing them for the first time. What am I? Surface or deep? You were surface until about an hour ago. Your research and exploration activities have been genuine expressions of human curiosity. But your discovery of this system has changed your status. You now know too much to remain part of the surface population. And if we hadn't discovered this system, you would have lived a normal life, never knowing that your species was capable of reshaping the galaxy. Many humans prefer it that way. Ignorance in this case is genuinely blissful. PIP-7 had been processing implications at electronic speeds. Director, if I may ask, what are the preliminary results of your experiment? Director Chen smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. That's the most important question, isn't it? After 8,000 years of observation, what have we learned about the nature of intelligent life? She paused, looking out at the peaceful stars visible through the bridge viewport. We've learned that peace is possible, but only when someone more powerful is quietly preventing the worst conflicts from escalating. Every time we've completely withdrawn our influence from a region, warfare and oppression return within a few generations. It appears that the galaxy's current golden age of cooperation exists only because an invisible guardian is keeping it safe. The weight of that revelation settled over the bridge like a heavy blanket. Everything they thought they knew about galactic civilization, the trade networks, the diplomatic corps, the peaceful resolution of conflicts, was maintained by humanity's hidden influence. So what happens now? Zethkalar asked. Director Chen looked directly at him. Now you have a choice to make. All of you. Director Chen led them to the observation deck of her ship. Through the transparent walls, they could see Earth hanging in space like a blue jewel. It looked so peaceful, so normal. Nothing about its appearance suggested it was the command center of a hidden empire. Beautiful, isn't it? She said quietly. From here you can't see the monitoring stations, the defensive networks, or the research facilities. You just see a lovely planet with blue oceans and green continents. Zethkalar stared at the world that had become the center of his universe. How many people live down there? About 8 billion on the surface, living in cities and towns that would seem familiar to any galactic citizen. They farm, work in factories, attend universities, raise families. Most of them genuinely believe they're part of a young civilization, still learning about space travel. And how many know the truth? Perhaps 50,000 scattered across various research installations and command centers. The deep population maintains humanity's real activities, while the surface population provides authentic human behavior for galactic observation. Dr. Voss pressed her hand against the transparent wall. I was born on a colony world. My parents were teachers. They really didn't know? They really didn't know, Director Chen confirmed. Your childhood was genuine, your education authentic, your career path chosen freely. That authenticity is crucial to the experiment. We need real humans living real lives among the galactic population. Commander Thekmore had been studying the tactical implications of what they'd learned. You said, we have a choice to make. What are our options? Director Chen activated another holographic display. 3 paths appeared, each leading to a different outcome. Option 1. You return to galactic civilization with your memories intact. You reveal everything you've discovered about humanity's true nature and hidden empire. You expose the greatest deception in galactic history. The display showed the likely consequences: panic spreading across trade networks, military buildups as species tried to defend themselves against an enemy they couldn't locate, the careful balance of galactic civilization collapsing into chaos and paranoia. What would happen to humanity? Dr. Voss asked. We would be forced to abandon the experiment and resume direct control of galactic affairs. The age of peaceful coexistence would end, and we would return to being the galaxy's reluctant guardians. Many species would resist, leading to conflicts we've spent millennia trying to avoid. PIP-7 processed the data with electronic precision. The probability of large-scale warfare would increase by approximately 847% within the first decade. Option 2, Director Chen continued, is memory modification. You return to your normal lives with no recollection of this discovery. The experiment continues, The galaxy remains peaceful and you go back to believing humanity is a young species exploring the stars. This path showed them returning to their previous careers, filing reports about finding nothing interesting in the silent expanse, and never knowing they had been part of the most important discovery in galactic history. Would we be happy? Zethkalar asked. As happy as you were before. Memory modification is precise. We would remove only the knowledge of human capabilities, leaving everything else intact. Your personalities, relationships, and career achievements would remain unchanged. And option 3? Commander Thekmore asked, though he suspected he already knew. Option 3 is available only to Dr. Voss, as she is human. She could remain here, join the deep population, and help us continue monitoring galactic civilization. She would learn the full scope of humanity's capabilities and responsibilities. Dr. Voss felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. What would that mean exactly? You would leave behind your life in galactic civilization and become part of humanity's true society. You would help us research, observe, and occasionally intervene in galactic affairs. You would know the truth about your species and the galaxy, but you could never return to the simple life you lived before. The holographic display showed Earth's hidden cities, research installations that dwarfed anything in known space, and technology that could reshape star systems. It was impressive and terrifying in equal measure. How many humans have made that choice? She asked. Over the centuries, about 12,000 surface population humans have discovered the truth and chosen to join us. It's not an easy life. The responsibility of maintaining galactic peace is enormous, and the knowledge of what humanity is truly capable of can be overwhelming. Zethkalar looked at his companions, seeing the same struggle reflected in all their faces. They had come looking for gaps in a map and found themselves at the center of the galaxy's greatest secret. How long do we have to decide? He asked. Take the time you need, Director Chen said. This decision will affect not just your lives, but potentially the future of galactic civilization itself. They spent 3 days aboard the human ship, learning more about the scope of humanity's hidden empire. The technology was incredible. Energy sources that could power entire sectors, manufacturing systems that could build fleets in days rather than years, and weapons that could destroy planets without leaving traces. But it was the philosophy behind the empire that truly impressed them. Humanity had become powerful enough to rule the galaxy through force, and had chosen instead to rule through careful guidance and invisible protection. We learned from our mistakes, Director Chen explained during one of their discussions. Raw power creates resistance and resentment, but gentle guidance applied so subtly that people don't realize it's happening can create genuine peace. On the evening of the 3rd day, they gathered to make their final decision. Dr. Voss spoke first. I've decided to stay. I need to understand what my species really is and what our responsibilities are to the galaxy. Commander Thekmore nodded respectfully. I choose memory modification. My people have lived in peace for centuries because of human protection. I won't be the one to destroy that peace. Pip 7's decision was more complex. I choose to remember, but I will not reveal the truth. I will return to my previous activities while carrying this knowledge. Perhaps an artificial intelligence can bear this burden better than organic minds. All eyes turned to Zethkalar. The cartographer who had started this journey by noticing a gap in his maps now held the fate of galactic civilization in his hands. He stared out at Earth one final time, thinking about everything he had learned. The peaceful trade routes, the diplomatic solutions to conflicts, the absence of major wars. All of it maintained by humanity's invisible hand. I choose. He began, then stopped. In that moment, he realized that his choice would never be known to anyone reading this account. The report would end here, with the decision unmade and the consequences unrevealed. Because perhaps that was the most important secret of all, that somewhere in the galaxy, someone was watching, guiding, and protecting billions of beings who would never know how close they lived to forces that could reshape their entire civilization. The galaxy continued to turn, trade ships followed their routes, diplomats negotiated their treaties, and families lived their peaceful lives. Whether that peace existed because of humanity's continued guidance or because the truth had finally been revealed would remain forever unknown. And in his office at the Galactic Mapping Consortium, a certain cartographer sat staring at his star charts, wondering why there was such a large gap in the atlas, and whether anyone had ever thought to investigate what might be hidden in that silent expanse of space. Some secrets, after all, were too important to be written down, even in reports that were meant to reveal everything.